January 23rd, 2024, 3:47 a.m. I'll never forget that timestamp because it changed everything. That's when Emma Rodriguez sent her last text to Marcus Chen. "Where are you? I'm worried." She never got a response. Marcus Chen wasn't just her fiancé. He was 28 years old, worth $2.3 billion, and in less than 24 hours, he was supposed to make history by donating his entire fortune to children's hospitals and education foundations. Instead, he vanished without a trace. I'm telling you this story because I've spent the last 8 months investigating what happened to Marcus Chen. What I discovered is a web of deception, family betrayal, and financial crimes that reaches into the highest levels of the cryptocurrency world. But this isn't just another story about greed and corruption. This is about love, loss, and the ultimate price of doing what's right. To understand why Marcus Chen decided to give away $2 billion, you need to know about David Chen. David was Marcus's younger brother, diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia when he was just 12 years old. This diagnosis would shape everything that followed in Marcus's life. I spoke with Dr. Patricia Williams, who treated David at Stanford Children's Hospital in 2012. She's been a pediatric oncologist for over 20 years, but she still remembers the Chen family vividly. The Chen family was completely unprepared for the financial burden, she told me during our interview in her office overlooking the hospital gardens. David's treatment was costing them nearly $50,000 per month. Insurance covered some of it, but they were still facing thousands in out-of-pocket expenses every week. Robert Chen worked as a senior accountant at a mid-sized firm in San Jose. He made decent money, about $85,000 a year, but nowhere near enough to cover David's medical expenses. Linda Chen was an elementary school teacher, bringing home another $45,000 annually. They were solidly middle class, but cancer doesn't care about your financial status. I remember Robert breaking down in my office. Dr. Williams continued. He asked me if there were cheaper treatment options. I had to explain that with pediatric leukemia, you don't get to choose the budget option. You either give your child the best possible care, or you watch them die. The Chen family took out second mortgages, borrowed against retirement accounts, and maxed out credit cards. Within 6 months, they were drowning in over $200,000 of medical debt, with no end in sight to David's treatment needs. That's where 14-year-old Marcus comes in. Emma Rodriguez was working as a pediatric nurse at Stanford back then. She was 22 years old, fresh out of nursing school, assigned to the oncology ward. She remembers Marcus clearly. There was this kid, always sitting in the hallway outside room 314, with an old Dell laptop. He'd be there for hours, typing away intensely. We thought he was doing homework, but the screen always looked like numbers and charts. Emma became curious about what Marcus was doing on that laptop. During my breaks, I'd sit near him and try to glimpse his screen. I saw what looked like stock charts and trading platforms. This 14-year-old kid was doing some kind of financial trading. One evening in late 2012, Emma finally asked Marcus what he was working on. He looked up at me with these incredibly serious eyes and said, "I'm trying to save my brother." Then he showed me his laptop screen. He was trading Bitcoin. Bitcoin was still relatively unknown in 2012, trading at around $200 per coin. Most people had never heard of cryptocurrency. But Marcus had discovered it through online forums where people discussed alternative investments and ways to make money quickly. Marcus told me he'd started with his $500 allowance, that he'd been saving for 2 years. Emma recalled. He'd been reading everything he could find about Bitcoin, analyzing price patterns, studying market trends. This kid had taught himself to trade cryptocurrency because he was desperate to help pay for his brother's treatment. But Marcus's Bitcoin trading was more than just random speculation. He had developed a system. Every day after school, he would spend hours researching crypto markets, reading technical analysis articles, and monitoring price movements across different exchanges. He kept detailed spreadsheets tracking his trades, his profits, and his losses. What amazed me was his discipline, Emma said. Most teenagers would have blown their money on stupid trades, but Marcus treated it like a business. He never risked more than 10% of his balance on a single trade. He set stop losses to limit his downside. He was more professional than most adult traders. David's treatment protocol required him to be in the hospital for extended periods. Marcus would arrive every day after school and stay until visiting hours ended at 9 p.m. He'd sit in that hallway, trading Bitcoin on the hospital's free Wi-Fi, slowly building his account balance. Dr. Williams remembers the progression. Over the months, I noticed Robert and Linda Chen looking less stressed about money. They stopped asking about payment plans and cheaper alternatives. I assumed their insurance situation had improved, but later I learned it was because of Marcus. By David's 6th month of treatment, Marcus had turned his initial $500 into over $15,000. Bitcoin's price was volatile, but Marcus had learned to read the patterns and time his trades carefully. He was making consistent profits, sometimes earning several $1,000s in a single week. Marcus would print out profit statements from his trading account and show them to his parents. Emma told me. At first, Robert and Linda didn't believe their 14-year-old son was making real money trading some internet currency they'd never heard of. But when Marcus started transferring funds to their bank account to cover David's medical bills, they realized it was legitimate. But the story takes a heartbreaking turn. David's leukemia proved more aggressive than doctors initially hoped. Despite intensive chemotherapy, radiation treatments, and experimental protocols, his condition continued to deteriorate. The medical bills kept mounting, not just for treatment, but for specialized medications, extended hospital stays, and consultations with leading oncologists across the country. Emma was working the night shift on March 14, 2012, when David's condition took a critical turn. His fever spiked to 104 degrees, and his blood counts crashed, she remembered. Dr. Williams called the family in around 2 a.m. We all knew David was dying. Marcus spent that entire night in David's room, holding his little brother's hand and talking to him about all the places they would visit together when he got better. Emma watched from the doorway as Marcus promised David they would go to Disneyland, see the Grand Canyon, and maybe even travel to Japan to see cherry blossoms. David couldn't really respond much by that point, but he squeezed Marcus's hand. Emma said, tears forming in her eyes as she recalled the scene. Marcus kept talking about their future adventures until David took his last breath at 6:17 a.m. on March 15th. David Chen died after 8 months of fighting leukemia. He was 12 years old. The total cost of his treatment had exceeded $400,000. Insurance had covered about $250,000, leaving the family responsible for $150,000 in medical debt. But Marcus had a surprise for his grieving parents. Dr. Williams remembers the meeting in her office, 3 days after David's funeral. Robert and Linda came in to discuss the remaining medical bills and set up a payment plan. That's when Marcus walked in with a folder full of papers. Marcus had been trading Bitcoin throughout David's entire treatment period. By March 2012, he had turned his original $500 investment into $52,000. But that wasn't all. Marcus had also been methodically selling his Bitcoin profits and investing in other cryptocurrencies as they emerged. His portfolio now included Litecoin, Namecoin, and several other early altcoins. Marcus laid out all these printed statements on my desk, Dr. Williams recalled. Bank records, trading histories, cryptocurrency wallet balances. He told his parents he had enough money to pay off all of David's medical bills, with some left over. Robert Chen broke down sobbing. I couldn't believe my 15-year-old son had been carrying this financial burden while grieving his dying brother, he told me during our interview at his San Jose office. Marcus had been so focused on helping our family that he'd essentially become a cryptocurrency expert. But the most powerful moment came during David's funeral service. Marcus gave a eulogy that would define the rest of his life. Emma attended the funeral, along with several other nurses and doctors who had cared for David. Marcus stood up at the podium, and for a moment I thought he wouldn't be able to speak, she remembered. But then he looked out at everyone and said something that I'll never forget. Marcus's eulogy was brief but devastating in its sincerity. David taught me that life isn't about how long you live, but about how much love you can give while you're here, he said. My little brother never complained about being sick, never asked why this was happening to him. He just fought every single day with more courage than I'll ever have. Then Marcus made the promise that would drive every decision he made for the rest of his life. David shouldn't have had to fight cancer and watch our parents struggle with money at the same time. No kid should have to worry that their family might go bankrupt trying to save their life. I promised David that I'll use everything I've learned, every dollar I can make, to make sure no other family has to choose between saving their child and financial survival. The funeral was on March 18, 2012. Marcus was 15 years old when he made that promise. Fast forward to 2024, and Marcus Chen had kept that promise in the most spectacular way possible. His company, ChenCoin Technologies, had become a blockchain powerhouse with contracts across 6 continents. His personal wealth had reached $2.3 billion, making him one of the youngest billionaires in American history. But Marcus never forgot where that wealth came from, or why he'd started building it. Emma Rodriguez had graduated nursing school and moved into investigative journalism, specializing in healthcare fraud and medical economics. She was covering a medical technology conference in San Francisco in 2019 when she spotted a familiar face in the crowd. "I saw this guy at the conference registration table, and something about him seemed familiar," Emma told me. "He was older, obviously, and wearing an expensive suit. But when he smiled, I suddenly recognized him. It was Marcus, the kid with the laptop from the hospital hallways." Emma approached Marcus during a break between conference sessions. "I went up to him and said, 'You probably don't remember me, but I was David's nurse at Stanford.' The look on his face was incredible, like he'd seen a ghost." Marcus remembered Emma perfectly. "He told me he'd never forgotten the night shift nurses who took care of David," Emma said. "He remembered all our names, knew details about conversations we'd had years earlier. David's death had affected him so deeply that he'd preserved every memory connected to that time." They spent the entire conference catching up. Marcus told Emma about building ChenCoin Technologies, about his success in cryptocurrency markets, and about the annual donations he'd been making to Stanford Children's Hospital. Every year on David's birthday, Marcus anonymously donated $100,000 to the pediatric oncology ward. "I asked him why he kept the donations anonymous," Emma said. "Marcus told me he didn't want recognition for something that felt like an obligation. He said helping sick kids wasn't charity, it was keeping a promise to his brother." Emma and Marcus began dating slowly. For the first 6 months, Emma had no idea about the extent of Marcus's wealth. He drove a 2018 Toyota Camry, lived in a modest apartment in Palo Alto, and wore clothes from Target, she laughed. "I thought he was just a regular tech worker who happened to be very generous with hospitals." Emma discovered Marcus's billionaire status by accident. She was researching an article about cryptocurrency inequality when she came across a Forbes article titled "America's Youngest Crypto Billionaires." Marcus's photo was prominently featured, along with details about ChenCoin Technologies' valuation and his personal net worth. "I confronted him about it that evening," Emma remembered. "I showed him the article and asked why he'd been lying to me about his wealth. That's when Marcus completely broke down." Marcus had been living with survivor's guilt for 7 years. He'd built enormous wealth, but he felt like a fraud because it all started with David's tragedy. "He told me he was terrified that people would only want him for his money," Emma said. "But more than that, he was terrified that his success was somehow built on David's suffering." That conversation led to Marcus revealing his deepest secret, the comprehensive plan he'd been developing to donate his entire fortune to children's hospitals and educational foundations. Marcus showed Emma detailed spreadsheets outlining how $2.3 billion could be distributed to maximize impact. He'd identified 47 children's hospitals across the United States that were struggling with funding shortfalls. He'd researched educational foundations that provided scholarships for students from low-income families. He'd even contacted international organizations working to improve childhood cancer survival rates in developing countries. Marcus had been working on this plan for over 2 years, Emma told me. He'd hired analysts, consulted with philanthropy experts, and studied the most effective charitable giving strategies. This wasn't an impulsive decision, it was a carefully calculated mission to honor David's memory. When Marcus proposed to Emma on Christmas Eve 2023, he didn't give her an expensive diamond ring. Instead, he presented her with a folder containing his complete charitable giving plan. "He said this was his real gift to me," Emma said, still emotional about the memory. "A chance to change the world together, to make sure David's death led to something beautiful instead of just being a tragedy." Emma said yes immediately. "I realized that night that I wasn't just marrying Marcus, I was joining his mission to fulfill a promise he'd made to a dying 12-year-old boy." But not everyone in Marcus's life supported his decision to donate $2.3 billion to charity. Robert Chen, Marcus's father, had complicated feelings about his son's success and his charitable plans. I met with Robert at his office in downtown San Jose, 3 months after Marcus's disappearance. Robert is 58 years old now, a methodical man who speaks carefully and precisely. But when he talks about Marcus's donation plans, his composure cracks. "I'm proud of what Marcus accomplished," Robert told me, "but I'm also terrified by his plan to give it all away. This money isn't just Marcus's, it represents security for our entire family, for future generations." Robert's concerns weren't entirely selfish. Marcus's success had lifted the entire Chen family out of financial insecurity. Robert had been able to pay off their mortgage, Linda had retired from teaching to pursue her art, and they'd established college funds for their nieces and nephews. "Marcus thinks he owes the world something, because he survived when David didn't," Robert said. But David would never have wanted Marcus to throw away everything he'd built. David would have wanted our family to be secure and happy. Linda Chen, Marcus's mother, shared some of Robert's concerns, but understood Marcus's motivations better. Marcus has been carrying this guilt for 12 years, she told me during our interview at the family home in San Jose. Every success he achieved reminded him that David never got the chance to grow up, go to college, start a career. Marcus felt like he was living the life David should have had. But Robert's objections to Marcus's charitable plans went deeper than family financial security. As Marcus's business grew, Robert had become increasingly involved in ChenCoin Technologies operations. He transitioned from accounting into business development, and his income had grown substantially along with the company's success. If Marcus liquidated his shares to fund the charity donations, the company's value would collapse. Robert would lose his high-paying position and probably struggle to find comparable work elsewhere. Marcus wasn't alone in his opposition within ChenCoin Technologies. The company had 5 major shareholders. Marcus owned 51%, Robert owned 20%, and 3 other investors, Timothy Walsh, Jennifer Morrison, and David Liu, owned the remaining 29%. These 3 investors had joined ChenCoin during its early growth phases, providing capital and expertise in exchange for equity stakes. By 2024, their combined shares were worth over $400 million. If Marcus proceeded with his donation plan, their investments would become virtually worthless overnight. I tracked down Timothy Walsh, the most prominent of these investors. Walsh is a 45-year-old venture capitalist who had been with ChenCoin since 2018. He agreed to meet me at his office in Menlo Park, but only after his legal team had cleared the interview topics. Marcus's donation plan was well-intentioned but financially catastrophic, Walsh told me during our carefully orchestrated conversation. ChenCoin's valuation was directly tied to Marcus's continued leadership and ownership stake. If he suddenly liquidated everything, it would signal to the market that he had no confidence in the company's future. Walsh and the other investors had spent months trying to convince Marcus to modify his charitable plans. They proposed a gradual donation schedule spread over 10 years, which would minimize the impact on ChenCoin's stock price. They suggested establishing a private foundation that would allow Marcus to maintain control over his wealth while still supporting charitable causes. We weren't trying to stop Marcus from helping sick children, Walsh insisted. We were trying to find a way for him to achieve his charitable goals without destroying the company and jobs of hundreds of employees. But Marcus was adamant about his timeline. He had chosen January 24, 2024, exactly 12 years after David's death, as his donation date. The symbolism was crucial to him. This wasn't just about giving money to charity. It was about keeping a specific promise he'd made at his brother's funeral. What Walsh didn't tell me in that first interview, but what I later discovered through financial records and FBI documents, was that ChenCoin Technologies was involved in much more than just blockchain technology development. The company had been operating a sophisticated cryptocurrency exchange service that helped wealthy clients move money internationally without triggering federal reporting requirements. While not technically illegal, these services were being used by clients who wanted to avoid taxes, hide assets from divorce proceedings, or move money out of countries with strict currency controls. Emma Rodriguez had sensed something was wrong in the weeks leading up to Marcus's disappearance. Marcus was becoming increasingly paranoid and stressed, she told me. He said he'd been asking questions about some of ChenCoin's international clients, and his father and business partners were being evasive about the details. On January 19, 2024, Marcus took a step that would seal his fate. He hired forensic accountant Sarah Kim to conduct an independent audit of ChenCoin's financial records. Sarah Kim is a former FBI financial crimes investigator who now works as a private consultant. She has a reputation for uncovering complex financial fraud schemes, and her client list includes several Fortune 500 companies and federal agencies. When Marcus contacted her, she initially assumed he was concerned about standard corporate governance issues. Marcus came to my office with boxes of financial records, Kim told me during our phone interview. Bank statements, cryptocurrency transaction logs, client contracts. He said he suspected ChenCoin was being used for money laundering, but he wanted an expert opinion before taking any action. Kim's preliminary review revealed a pattern of suspicious transactions. Large amounts of money were flowing through ChenCoin's accounts from shell companies registered in tax havens. The company's blockchain technology was being used to convert these funds into various cryptocurrencies, move them through multiple international exchanges to obscure their origins, and finally convert them back into clean dollars deposited in offshore accounts. Within 48 hours, I knew Marcus was right, Kim said. ChenCoin wasn't just a technology company. It was also functioning as an unlicensed money service business. They were helping clients circumvent federal reporting requirements and international banking regulations. Kim estimated that ChenCoin had processed over $800 million through this operation between 2020 and 2024. The company was charging fees of 3 to 5% for these services, generating tens of millions in revenue that wasn't being reported properly to federal authorities. When I showed Marcus my preliminary findings, he was devastated, Kim remembered. He realized that his family and business partners had been using his company and his reputation to commit federal crimes. Marcus's response was immediate and uncompromising. He wanted to shut down the money laundering operation immediately and report everything to federal authorities. But when he confronted his father and business partners with Kim's findings, their reaction was hostile and threatening. The confrontation took place on January 21, 2024, during an emergency board meeting at ChenCoin's headquarters. Security footage shows Marcus arriving at the office at 2 p.m., carrying Kim's audit report in a briefcase. Robert Chen, Timothy Walsh, Jennifer Morrison, and David Liu arrived separately over the next 15 minutes. What happened in that conference room would remain a mystery until Jennifer Morrison broke her silence months later, after being arrested on federal money laundering charges. Morrison reached out to me in September 2024, hoping to negotiate a more favorable plea agreement by cooperating with investigators. She agreed to describe the January 21st confrontation in detail, and her account reveals the desperation that led to Marcus's murder. Marcus walked into that meeting like he was going to war, Morrison told me during our recorded interview at her lawyer's office in San Francisco. He had printed copies of Sarah Kim's audit report, and he slammed them on the conference table with this look of absolute disgust on his face. According to Morrison, Marcus's opening statement was devastating. "I know what you've been doing with my company. You've been using ChenCoin to help criminals launder money. You've turned David's legacy into a criminal enterprise." Robert Chen's response revealed the extent of his involvement in the illegal operations. "Marcus, you don't understand the complexity of international finance," Morrison remembered him saying. "These clients are legitimate business people who need privacy for their transactions. We're not helping criminals, we're helping successful people protect their wealth from excessive government intrusion." But Marcus had done his research. He knew that several of ChenCoin's clients were under investigation for tax evasion, sanctions violations, and other financial crimes. Marcus pulled out a list of client names and started reading them aloud, Morrison said. He'd identified at least 12 clients who were either under federal investigation or had been previously convicted of financial crimes. Timothy Walsh's response was more direct and threatening. "Marcus, if you try to shut down our international services, you'll destroy the company and everyone who depends on it for their livelihood," Morrison recalled Walsh saying. "You'll also be admitting that you've been complicit in these operations for years. Your signature is on all the corporate documents. How do you think that will look to federal investigators?" The meeting lasted over 4 hours. Marcus presented evidence of the money laundering operations and demanded immediate cessation of all illegal activities. His father and business partners alternated between denying wrongdoing, minimizing the severity of their actions, and threatening Marcus with legal and financial consequences if he exposed them. By the end of the meeting, Marcus looked completely defeated, Morrison said. He realized that exposing his family's crimes would likely result in his own prosecution, since he was the majority owner and CEO of the company. But Marcus hadn't given up. What his family and business partners didn't know was that he had already contacted the FBI. In October 2024, while going through Marcus's personal effects that had been held as evidence, Emma found something that changed her understanding of everything that had happened. Hidden in Marcus's apartment, inside a copy of the Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous, was a handwritten letter dated January 20, 2024, one day before the confrontational board meeting. The letter was addressed to Emma, but she had never seen it before. Marcus had apparently hidden it, planning to give it to her after the donation ceremony was complete. "My dearest Emma," the letter began, "if you're reading this, something has gone wrong with my plans. I want you to know that everything I've done has been for David, for you, and for all the children who deserve a chance at life without their families being destroyed by medical debt." But the most shocking revelation in the letter was Marcus's confession about his cooperation with federal authorities. "I need you to know that I've been working with the FBI for over a year," Marcus wrote. "I discovered Dad's illegal activities in late 2022, and I contacted Agent Carol Peters in January 2023. I've been providing information about ChenCoin's money laundering operations while trying to build a case that would minimize the damage to innocent employees and shareholders." When Emma showed me this letter, I immediately contacted Agent Peters for confirmation. What she told me completely reframed Marcus's final months and the circumstances of his disappearance. Marcus came to us voluntarily, Agent Peters told me during our interview at FBI headquarters in San Francisco. He'd discovered suspicious transactions in ChenCoin's accounts and wanted to know if they constituted federal crimes. When we confirmed they did, he offered to cooperate with our investigation. Marcus had been wearing recording devices to business meetings for months, capturing conversations with his father and other shareholders about their illegal activities. The FBI had been planning to execute search warrants and make arrests in February 2024, after Marcus's charity donation was complete. Marcus insisted on timing our operation after his donation ceremony, Peters explained. He didn't want the legal proceedings to interfere with getting that money to hospitals and schools. He was adamant that David's legacy shouldn't be tainted by association with criminal investigations. The recordings Marcus made for the FBI revealed the extent and sophistication of ChenCoin's money laundering operations. In one particularly damning conversation from November 2023, Robert Chen explicitly discussed helping clients avoid federal tax obligations through cryptocurrency conversions. The beauty of our system is that traditional banking regulators can't track cryptocurrency movements across multiple international exchanges, Robert Chen said in the recording. We're providing a valuable service to people who want to protect their wealth from excessive government taxation and regulation. Timothy Walsh was even more direct in a recorded conversation from December 2023. We're not money launderers, we're financial privacy advocates. The federal government has no constitutional right to monitor every financial transaction made by American citizens. We're helping restore financial freedom. These recordings became crucial evidence in the federal prosecution of the ChenCoin conspirators, but they also revealed the immense psychological pressure Marcus had been under in his final months. Emma told me that Marcus had been suffering from severe insomnia and anxiety attacks in late 2023 and early 2024. I thought he was just stressed about the charity donation and the family conflicts, she said. Now I understand that he was carrying the burden of betraying his own father to uphold the law. The hidden letter also contained Marcus's contingency plans in case something happened to him. He had already executed legal documents transferring ownership of his ChenCoin shares to a trust controlled by Emma, ensuring that even if he disappeared, his family couldn't inherit wealth built on criminal activities. I've arranged for all the evidence to be turned over to the FBI if I disappear or die under suspicious circumstances, Marcus wrote. Agent Peters has access codes to cryptocurrency accounts containing proof of everything Dad and the others have done. Don't let them escape justice, and don't let them prevent David's money from helping sick children. Reading Marcus's letter, I realized that his murder wasn't just about stopping a charity donation. It was about silencing an FBI informant who posed an existential threat to a multi-million-dollar criminal operation. The night of January 21, 2024, after the confrontational board meeting, Timothy Walsh, Jennifer Morrison, and David Liu met privately to discuss their options. Robert Chen was not included in this planning session. He had gone home, still hoping to reason with his son and find a compromise solution. But Walsh, Morrison, and Liu had concluded that Marcus posed too great a threat to their financial security and personal freedom. They knew that if Marcus proceeded with his charity donation and his cooperation with federal authorities, they would all face decades in federal prison. We panicked, Walsh later confessed to FBI investigators. Marcus had us cornered. He had recordings of our conversations, financial evidence of our operations, and the legal authority to shut down everything. We felt like we had no choice but to eliminate the threat. The three conspirators spent several hours that night planning Marcus's kidnapping. They knew his routines. Marcus often took late-night walks around his Palo Alto neighborhood to clear his head and think through complex problems. They decided to grab him during one of these walks and force him to abandon both his charity plans and his FBI cooperation. Marcus left his apartment at 11:30 p.m. on January 22nd for his usual nighttime walk. He was on the phone with Emma, discussing their travel plans for their post-donation honeymoon trip to Japan. Emma remembers the conversation clearly because it was the last time she ever heard Marcus's voice. Marcus was excited about visiting the cherry blossom gardens in Kyoto, Emma told me. He said after we got married and fulfilled his promise to David, we could finally start living for ourselves instead of just honoring the past. Morrison was driving a rented white van, parked on University Avenue near Marcus's regular walking route. Walsh and Liu were hiding in the back of the van, equipped with a taser and zip ties. Their plan was to incapacitate Marcus, drive him to a remote cabin Walsh owned in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and hold him until he agreed to their demands. Marcus was walking down the sidewalk, talking on his phone and completely unaware of what was about to happen, Morrison later told investigators. I pulled up next to him, and David Liu jumped out of the van. Liu tasered Marcus in the back, causing him to collapse and drop his phone. The call with Emma was still connected, and she heard Marcus scream before the line went dead. Emma immediately started calling Marcus back, but his phone had been destroyed in the fall. We got Marcus into the van within about 30 seconds, Morrison confessed. But something went wrong almost immediately. Marcus was convulsing much more violently than we expected from the taser. His breathing became irregular, and his lips started turning blue. Marcus Chen had an undiagnosed heart condition, a genetic arrhythmia that had never caused problems during his healthy, low-stress lifestyle. But the combination of the taser shock and the extreme psychological stress of being kidnapped triggered a massive cardiac event. We tried CPR, but none of us really knew what we were doing. Marcus went into full cardiac arrest, and we couldn't revive him. The 3 kidnappers turned murderers now faced a much more serious crime than they had planned. Instead of a kidnapping that might have resulted in federal charges with possible plea agreements, they were now dealing with a murder that could carry the death penalty. In their panic, they decided to dispose of Marcus's body and create the impression that he had voluntarily disappeared. They drove to a remote section of the Santa Cruz Mountains and buried Marcus in a shallow grave near Walsh's cabin. Then they returned to Marcus's apartment using his keys, accessed his computer with passwords they had obtained by observing him during business meetings, and began creating digital evidence to support their cover story. We transferred about $15 million from Marcus's cryptocurrency accounts to make it look like he had taken money and run away, Morrison confessed. We also used his laptop to book a flight to Singapore, thinking that would make investigators believe he had fled the country. The conspirators were careful to create a plausible narrative. Marcus had been overwhelmed by family pressure about his charity donation, had suffered some kind of mental breakdown, and had decided to disappear with enough money to start a new life abroad. But Emma Rodriguez never believed that story for a moment. Marcus would never abandon his promise to donate that money. Emma insisted during every conversation with FBI investigators, and he would never leave me without an explanation. I knew from day one that someone had taken him. Emma's conviction that Marcus had been murdered drove her to conduct her own investigation parallel to the FBI's official inquiry. As an investigative journalist, she had contacts in the cryptocurrency world and the medical community that law enforcement couldn't easily access. Through a source at a major cryptocurrency exchange, Emma discovered that the $15 million transferred from Marcus's wallets on January 21st had been moved through a complex series of transactions designed to obscure its trail. But the money's final destination was shocking. It had ended up in accounts controlled by ChenCoin Technologies. Someone at ChenCoin had Marcus's private keys, Emma told me. They had access to his most secure cryptocurrency wallets. That meant the theft was an inside job, committed by someone Marcus trusted completely. Emma brought this information to Agent Peters in April 2024. The FBI immediately obtained federal search warrants for the homes and offices of all ChenCoin shareholders. What they found at Timothy Walsh's Menlo Park mansion would break the case wide open. Hidden in Walsh's home office safe, FBI agents discovered a notebook containing dozens of cryptocurrency private keys, including keys that matched Marcus's stolen wallets. But more importantly, they found handwritten notes outlining the kidnapping plan in detail. The notebook contained Walsh's step-by-step planning for what he called neutralizing the Marcus problem. The original plan involved kidnapping, imprisonment, and coercion, but a handwritten note dated January 23rd revealed their realization that the subject expired during transport. Agent Peters confronted Walsh with this evidence in July 2024. Facing multiple federal charges including kidnapping resulting in death, which carries a potential death penalty, Walsh agreed to cooperate with investigators in exchange for a life sentence without possibility of parole. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Walsh confessed during his recorded statement to FBI investigators. We just wanted to stop the donation and keep Marcus quiet about our business operations. We never intended for him to die. Walsh's confession led investigators to Marcus's grave in the Santa Cruz Mountains. On August 15, 2024, FBI forensic teams recovered Marcus Chen's remains from the shallow grave where his killers had buried him 7 months earlier. The discovery of Marcus's body confirmed what Emma had maintained from the beginning. Marcus Chen had not run away with stolen cryptocurrency. He had been murdered by people he trusted, people who valued their financial security more than his life. Timothy Walsh, Jennifer Morrison, and David Liu were all charged with kidnapping resulting in death under federal law. All 3 accepted plea agreements to avoid potential death sentences. Walsh received life in prison without parole, while Morrison and Liu each received sentences of 35 years in federal prison. Robert Chen, while cleared of involvement in his son's murder, was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for his role in the money laundering operation. During his sentencing hearing, Robert broke down completely. "I lost my son David to cancer, and now I've lost my son Marcus to greed," Robert said through tears. "I participated in illegal activities, but I never imagined they would lead to Marcus's death. I failed both my sons, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting the choices that cost Marcus his life." The $2.3 billion fortune that Marcus had wanted to donate to charity became the subject of a complex legal battle involving federal asset forfeiture laws, corporate bankruptcy proceedings, and inheritance disputes. Emma Rodriguez, as Marcus's designated heir and the beneficiary of his trust, inherited the majority of his wealth after legal fees and federal penalties. In December 2024, 11 months after Marcus's disappearance, Emma announced that she would fulfill Marcus's original plan, donating the entire fortune to children's hospitals and educational foundations, exactly as Marcus had intended. "Marcus died trying to do the right thing," Emma said during the press conference announcing the donation. "The least I can do is make sure his dream becomes reality. Every sick child who receives treatment because of this money will be living proof that Marcus kept his promise to David." The first donation was made on March 15, 2025, exactly 13 years after David Chen's death. Emma stood in the same conference room at Stanford Children's Hospital, where Dr. Patricia Williams had once discussed David's treatment options with the Chen family, now presenting a check for $500 million to establish the David and Marcus Chen Foundation for Pediatric Care. This money will ensure that no family ever has to choose between saving their child and financial ruin, Emma announced. "That was Marcus's promise to David, and now it's my promise to Marcus." The remaining $1.8 billion is being distributed over 5 years to hospitals and schools across the country and internationally. The donations are funding new pediatric oncology wings, purchasing advanced medical equipment, supporting research into childhood cancers, and providing college scholarships for students from low-income families. But Emma's commitment to honoring Marcus's memory goes beyond just distributing money. She has continued working as an investigative journalist, now specializing in cryptocurrency crime and financial fraud. Her upcoming book, tentatively titled Digital Betrayal: How My Fiancée Exposed a $1 billion Conspiracy, details the complete story of Marcus's murder and the investigation that followed. "Marcus always said that sunlight is the best disinfectant," Emma told me during our final interview for this story. "By exposing what happened to him, maybe we can prevent other idealistic young people from being destroyed by the greed of people they trust." The David and Marcus Chen Foundation has also established a cryptocurrency whistleblower protection fund, using Marcus's FBI evidence and testimony to help other people who discover financial crimes in the digital asset industry. The fund provides legal representation, financial support, and personal security for whistleblowers who risk retaliation for exposing criminal activities. "Marcus proved that doing the right thing can cost you everything," Emma said, "but it can also change everything. We want to make it safer for other people to choose courage over complicity." The foundation has already assisted 7 cryptocurrency whistleblowers in providing evidence to federal authorities, leading to investigations of money laundering operations in 4 different countries. 3 major cryptocurrency exchanges have implemented new compliance procedures based on information provided through the Chen Foundation's whistleblower program. Congressional hearings on cryptocurrency regulation have extensively cited Marcus Chen's case as evidence of the need for stronger federal oversight of digital asset businesses. Senator Elizabeth Warren, who chairs the Senate Banking Committee's subcommittee on digital assets, has proposed comprehensive legislation requiring cryptocurrency companies to report suspicious transactions and submit to regular federal audits. The Marcus Chen case demonstrates that the cryptocurrency industry cannot police itself, Warren said during Senate hearings in March 2025. "We need robust federal oversight to protect both investors and the integrity of our financial system." Marcus Chen died because criminals were able to operate with impunity in an unregulated industry. The proposed legislation, known as the Marcus Chen Digital Asset Transparency Act, would require cryptocurrency businesses to maintain detailed records of all transactions, report suspicious activities to federal authorities, and undergo annual compliance audits. Companies that fail to comply would face severe financial penalties and potential criminal prosecution. But beyond the policy changes and legal reforms that have resulted from Marcus's death, the most important legacy remains the children whose lives have been saved by his charitable donations. Dr. Patricia Williams, who treated David Chen 13 years ago, now oversees pediatric oncology services funded by the Chen Foundation at Stanford Children's Hospital. She has watched hundreds of families receive life-saving treatment without facing the financial devastation that once threatened the Chen family. "Every day, I see children getting treatment that would have been financially impossible for their families just a few years ago," Dr. Williams told me. "These kids are alive today because Marcus Chen turned his personal tragedy into a force for good in the world." The foundation has funded treatment for over 4,000 children with serious illnesses, provided college scholarships to 800 students from low-income families, and supported medical research that has led to improved survival rates for several types of childhood cancer. The ripple effects of Marcus's donation will continue for generations. Emma Rodriguez visits the Stanford Children's Hospital Pediatric Oncology Ward every month, often sitting in the same hallway where she first met 14-year-old Marcus trading Bitcoin on his laptop. She watches new families navigate the same crisis that once threatened to destroy the Chens, but now with the financial support that Marcus's donation provides. Every time I see a family who isn't facing bankruptcy because of their child's illness, I know Marcus succeeded, Emma reflected. He kept his promise to David, even though it cost him his life. But Emma also carries the weight of understanding what Marcus's idealism ultimately cost him. Marcus could have ignored his father's crimes, made his charity donation quietly, and lived happily ever after, she told me. Instead, he chose to be an FBI informant because he couldn't let David's legacy be built on dirty money. That choice saved him morally but killed him physically. The Marcus Chen case has become a landmark study in law enforcement training programs across the country. FBI agents specializing in financial crimes now use Marcus's cooperation in murder as a case study in protecting civilian informants and investigating complex cryptocurrency conspiracies. Agent Carol Peters, who handled Marcus's cooperation and investigated his murder, has become a leading expert in cryptocurrency crime investigation. She frequently speaks at law enforcement conferences about the lessons learned from the Chen case. Marcus Chen's murder taught us that cryptocurrency investigations often involve life and death stakes, Peters explained during a recent conference presentation. When billions of dollars are involved, some people will literally kill to protect their criminal operations. We need to take that threat seriously when working with civilian informants. The FBI has implemented new protocols for protecting cryptocurrency whistleblowers, including enhanced security measures, accelerated investigation timelines, and coordination with federal prosecutors to minimize the time that informants remain exposed to danger. Timothy Walsh, serving his life sentence at ADX Florence Federal Penitentiary in Colorado, has expressed remorse for his role in Marcus's murder, but maintains that he never intended for the kidnapping to result in death. I live every day knowing that my greed killed a good person who was trying to honor his dead brother, Walsh wrote in a letter to the parole board that will never grant him release. Marcus Chen was everything I pretended to be: successful, principled, and genuinely caring about other people. I destroyed him because I was terrified of losing money that I hadn't even earned honestly. Jennifer Morrison and David Liu, serving their sentences at federal prisons in California, have both declined to comment publicly about their roles in Marcus's murder. Robert Chen, now 59 years old and serving his 15-year sentence for money laundering, has become an advocate for white-collar crime prevention within the federal prison system. He teaches financial literacy classes to other inmates and frequently speaks about how his illegal activities led to his son's death. I thought I was building something for my family's future, Robert said during a recorded interview from federal prison. Instead, I created the circumstances that led to my son's murder. Marcus died because I chose greed over integrity, and I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life. Linda Chen, Marcus's mother, has struggled with depression and survivor's guilt since losing both her sons, David to cancer and Marcus to murder. She volunteers at the Stanford Children's Hospital Pediatric Oncology Ward, reading stories to young patients and providing emotional support to their families. I lost David to a disease we couldn't control, Linda told me during our interview at her small apartment in San Jose. But I lost Marcus to human choices, my husband's choices, his business partner's choices, and Marcus's choice to prioritize moral principles over personal safety. I'm proud of Marcus for doing the right thing, but I wish he'd chosen to protect himself instead. The house where Marcus grew up has been sold, with the proceeds donated to the Chen Foundation. Linda lives modestly on Social Security and part-time work, having refused to accept any money from Marcus's estate. I don't deserve to profit from Marcus's death, she said. That money should help sick children, just like Marcus wanted. That's the only way his murder can have any positive meaning. As I conclude this investigation, I keep returning to the central tragedy of Marcus Chen's story. He was murdered for trying to do something unquestionably good with his wealth. In a world where billionaires are often criticized for hoarding resources or using their money for personal aggrandizement, Marcus chose to give away everything he had built. His decision to cooperate with federal authorities to expose his family's crimes demonstrated moral courage that cost him his life. He could have ignored the illegal activities, focused on his charity work, and lived safely with Emma. Instead, he chose to risk everything to ensure that his brother's legacy wouldn't be tainted by association with criminal money. Marcus Chen's story serves as both inspiration and warning. It shows the transformative power of wealth directed by conscience and love, rather than greed and selfishness. But it also demonstrates the extreme dangers faced by people who threaten established criminal operations, even within their own families. The 4,000 children who have received life-saving medical treatment through the Chen Foundation represent Marcus's ultimate victory over the people who killed him. Every family that avoids financial ruin because of his donations is living proof that love can triumph over greed, even posthumously. Emma Rodriguez continues to honor Marcus's memory through her investigative work, her oversight of the foundation, and her commitment to helping other cryptocurrency whistleblowers expose criminal activities safely. She has never remarried, focusing instead on fulfilling the charitable mission that she and Marcus planned together. Marcus used to say that David was the real hero in their family. Emma told me during our final interview. David faced terminal illness with courage and never complained about the financial burden his treatment placed on everyone. Marcus just wanted to be worthy of David's memory. In death, Marcus Chen achieved something that eluded him in life. He finally felt worthy of his brother's memory. The promise he made at David's funeral has been fulfilled completely. No family receiving treatment through the Chen Foundation will ever have to choose between saving their child and avoiding financial ruin. Marcus Chen wanted to turn his personal tragedy into a force for good in the world. Despite being murdered by people he trusted, despite never seeing his charitable dreams realized personally, he succeeded beyond what even he might have imagined. Today, 13 years after David Chen died of leukemia in a hospital room in Stanford, his older brother's promise continues to save lives around the world. Marcus paid the ultimate price for his idealism, but his death ensured that David's legacy would be measured not in suffering endured, but in suffering prevented. The $2.3 billion that Marcus Chen wanted to donate to charity is helping thousands of sick children receive the treatment they need. His cooperation with federal authorities exposed a massive criminal conspiracy and led to important reforms in cryptocurrency regulation. His murder sparked national conversations about wealth inequality, corporate responsibility, and the price of moral courage. But perhaps most importantly, Marcus Chen's story proves that love for a dead brother, love for sick children, love for justice, can survive even murder and continue changing the world long after the person who felt that love is gone. In the end, Marcus Chen kept his promise to David, and Emma Rodriguez is keeping her promise to Marcus. And thousands of children will live because two brothers loved each other enough to turn tragedy into hope, even when that love cost them everything.